Hello, and welcome to this presentation, Understanding MURS. In this presentation, we'll provide a short technical introduction to MURS, that is the multi-use radio service, including a brief discussion of how MURS radios can be tested using a radio test set. MURS is one of several short-range two-way radio services widely used in the United States. In this presentation, we'll occasionally compare MURS to both FRS, the family radio service, as well as GMRS, the general mobile radio service. So please see the separate presentations on each of these services if you're interested in learning more about them. The multi-use radio service is a license-free communications service that can be used for voice and/or data at VHF. As the name implies, this multi-use service can be used for both personal and for business activities. MURS was first established by the United States Federal Communications Commission in the year 2000 by repurposing some previously licensed VHF industrial/business frequencies. You may sometimes hear these referred to as color dot radios, since many of these radios had small colored stickers on them that indicated their operating frequency. MURS is primarily used for the transmission of analog voice using FM, and one very common example of this are the in-store radios used by large retailers. It is, however, worth noting that MURS can also be used for telecommand and/or telemetry applications, using general-purpose data modems. Examples of these types of MURS applications include security systems and cameras, environmental tracking, vehicle tracking, and remote control. Next, let's discuss some of the technical aspects of MURS radios. The maximum permissible output power of a MURS radio is 2 watts, and this is the same on all MURS channels. Note that other similar services, like FRS and GMRS, have different power limits for different channels. The use of VHF generally provides better outdoor range compared to UHF services, assuming similar output powers, although this is very dependent on the terrain or propagation environment. One advantage of MURS over FRS is that MURS allows the use of external antennas, which can also increase the achievable range or coverage. And as mentioned previously, most MURS radios use narrowband FM. Other analog and digital modulation schemes are permitted, for example using FSK or frequency shift keying in data applications. However, these other modulation types are relatively rare in practice. Subaudible tones such as CTCSS and/or DCS may also be used, primarily to avoid having the radio break squelch for uninteresting transmissions. MURS radios are limited to one of 5 designated VHF frequencies or channels, some of which are at 151 MHz and some of which are at 154 MHz. The reason for this discontinuity is that the two 154 MHz channels were repurposed from the older licensed business bands. Note too that these two channels, still sometimes referred to by their traditional dot colors, also have wider permissible modulation bandwidths. This allows the use of older or legacy business radios for MURS. Since MURS is license-free, this means that channels are shared. That is, no one has an exclusive right to use a particular channel. That said, the FCC does state that legacy licensed business users have priority on their channels, although this priority is not strictly defined and is rarely enforced. MURS regulations can be found in FCC 47 CFR Part 95 Subpart J, and these include several restrictions regarding the use of MURS. One of these is that repeaters are not permitted. This is similar to FRS, but unlike GMRS. And although external antennas may be used in MURS, antenna height is restricted to 20 feet above the highest point on a structure, or 60 feet above ground, whichever is higher. A few of the additional restrictions include a prohibition on continuous, that is, nonstop transmissions, although the regulations don't define the frequency and duration of the required pauses. These regulations, however, do not necessarily apply to the holders of legacy business or industrial licenses, who may be allowed to both use higher powers and/or use repeaters in some cases. The FCC regulations also specify the technical requirements for MURS radios. These include power limits, frequency accuracy, emission bandwidths, spurious emission limits, etc., and radios must meet these in order to be certified for sale in the United States. Many of these parameters can be measured or tested using a general-purpose radio test set, which for most tests is connected to the radio's antenna connector. In addition to these required tests, radio test sets can also be used for performance testing and troubleshooting. Examples of these kinds of tests include measurements of audio quality, CTCSS or DCS tone testing, squelch and sensitivity measurements, etc. Let's end with a brief summary. MURS, or the Multi-Use Radio Service, is one of several short-range two-way radio services created by the FCC for use in the United States. This service is license-free, and both personal and business use is permitted. MURS is primarily used for FM voice, but can also be used for data. There are 5 MURS frequencies, or channels, all in the VHF range, and maximum output power is 2 watts on all channels. Note, however, that the maximum deviation, or maximum transmission bandwidth, is however different on the 2 color dot channels. MURS allows the use of detachable or external antennas, although there are some antenna height restrictions for outdoor antennas. One thing to keep in mind is that some MURS regulations, such as maximum power or the prohibition on repeaters, may not apply to legacy licensed business users. And finally, general-purpose radio test sets can be used both to verify conformity to FCC regulations for certification purposes, as well as for general troubleshooting and performance testing. This concludes our presentation, Understanding MURS. If you'd like to learn more about other two-way radio technologies, how these technologies are tested, or about radio test sets from Rohde & Schwartz, please see the links in the video description. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit us at rohde-schwartz.com.